And welcome everyone to Big League Dreaming, the podcast, a show about fulfilling your dreams and taking it to the next level. I'm John Gonzalez, one of the co-hosts of the podcast. And today's going to be a lot of fun. They always are. They're fun because I get to do what I think any dad would love to do, and that's have a podcast with his sons. If you're a first-time listener or just stumbled upon our show, if you're a baseball fan and you want to talk about the game or hear some different people talking about the game, then you found a great show to listen to. At least we think it's a great show because we're talking about baseball. You can't go wrong with there. So the format is a dad and his three sons talking about the game they love. Today on the show, we have two of the three. Let's introduce son number one. Zach, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Starting to warm up down here. D2 college baseball this weekend, D1 next weekend. I'm fired up.
Oh, man, you're right. D1 is next weekend. I forgot about that. Although I think we mentioned in the last podcast, D2 is this weekend, though, huh?
Yeah, I believe they started last weekend, but the D2 school down the road from me, Wingate University, they have a home series this weekend, so probably try to go catch them tomorrow. But tonight is the championship of the Caribbean World Series, so I'll be watching that tonight too, Dad.
Yes, it is going to be Venezuela, right?
Venezuela and Dominican, yep.
Dominican, that should be a game. I didn't think Dominican was going to make it this far, but we'll talk about the Caribbean series here in a second. Let's meet son number two. Ty, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm ready for baseball to start up. We're finally getting that warmer weather. I mean, I was outside in a t-shirt and shorts yesterday, so I'm ready for some baseball.
Yeah, I walked through the neighborhood, saw some kids playing catch. We know that son number three can't be on the podcast today because they're outside taking advantage of this warm weather. That is Zane Gonzalez. He is the associate coach at Indiana University South Bend, down in South Bend, Indiana, where he's coordinating pitching. He's the pitching coordinator and the recruiting coordinator. So he's definitely got his hands full. They're getting ready for their first trip coming up in a couple of weeks. I was just down there, guys. I got to spend some time with Zane and Coach Boozy and the whole team. Got to meet the 2023-24 IUSB Titans, and it was a fun banquet.
Yeah, they put you on the mic to host some stuff, right? That was pretty cool.
Yeah, true fashion. I walk up there and I said, "Okay, what's the format?" And they give me the lineup of the show, and I said, "Great, where's the mic?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, we got one problem. There's no mic."
You should have told me. I could have let you borrow that one.
Exactly. I have a mic, and I'm like, I could have brought stuff with me, but no, they're like, we don't have a mic, so I just scream the whole time. It's hilarious, but. Thanks to Coach Boozy and the whole team for having come out and introduce the team and show their hype video. I'll share that with you guys. In fact, we'll share that on the Big League Dreaming social media channels, their hype video 2024 video. It's pretty awesome. So anyway, let's introduce our guest. Let's get there. Zach, why don't you have the honors of introducing our guest today?
Yeah, absolutely. Excited for this one. Today we have a former White Sox draft pick, minor leaguer in their system for a few years before transitioning into coaching at the University of Cincinnati, and then packed up the family, moved him to Florida to IMG Academy, where he's now a student advisor for baseball. John Lackaff. John, thanks for hopping on, man. We appreciate it.
Zach, it's my pleasure. It's great to see you guys, and thanks for what you're doing and offering a lot of insight for the youth baseball player out there.
Zach, why don't you tell folks how you got to meet John? You were talking about it off the air a few seconds ago. I love the story.
Yeah. I was scouting for Perfect Game down in Fort Myers, and I got to connect with a lot of coaches down there. Perfect Game is the spot to be if you're a college coach and professional scouts as well. So I got to meet John, talk to him, talking about baseball and things like that. And then the next year, Cincinnati came down to Myrtle Beach to play Coastal Carolina. Earlier that day, because the baseball grind never stops, John is scouting a high school baseball game, Myrtle Beach High School, and my Coastal Club team was playing at the field next door. He literally walked over and watched a few innings of our game, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, Zach, as you know, you need go-to guys as a college recruiter, and you became one of my go-to guys, and so I relied on you, as like a couple other guys. So I always appreciated our relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always thinking of different guests to hop on our show, and I was, oh, Dad, we got to talk to Coach John. Absolutely. So yeah, fired up, and to hear about IMG too.
Sure. Yeah. Excited to talk about it.
I can't wait to talk about IMG. I've always wondered about what it's like. You always hear about it in the headlines, right? Especially with the big name sports like football and basketball. But Ty and I were talking off air that we don't really know a lot about how it all works and everything. So we have a lot of questions about IMG. We'll get to that in a second. I just want to hear your baseball story. Like, where are you from originally? When did you first pick up a baseball and a bat and you're like, you know what? I'm going to do this thing, right? I'm going to be a Major League Baseball player. We all have those dreams, right? So tell us your story.
Yeah, I grew up outside of Chicago, John, and in a town called Downers Grove, Chicago, a southwest suburb. And, my dream, was partly to become a Major League Baseball player, but also to be an NBA player. I grew up, going to see Michael Jordan play and, was there during those championship years. And pro sports were big. I ended up marrying a girl from Ohio who's a Buckeye, and now, obviously an Ohio State fan because of that. But, in Chicago, very much a Michael Jordan fan. And then even, the Frank Thomases and Robin Venturas. But I was a big multi-sport athlete growing up. And, again, like growing up with Deion Sanders becoming big, Brian Jordan and Bo Jackson. And that was my goal, was to play multiple sports as long as I could. So I actually got an opportunity after high school to go to Miami University of Ohio, but better known as Miami of Ohio, to play basketball and baseball. I did that for 1 year, and then before I kind of realized the NBA was probably going to be a long shot at that point, and then I just played baseball through my junior year, drafted by the White Sox, and then played in the minor leagues for a few years, played independent ball, got out of baseball, got into the business world, but then got back into coaching. And Dan Simons, who's the director of baseball at IMG Academy, brought me on staff as an assistant coach. And that was back in 2012. And so I was an assistant coach for Dan Simons for a year. And then a former teammate of mine, Ty Neal, was at Cincinnati. And so then he gave me a shot at Cincinnati. And eventually, obviously, I met your son, Zach. Was there until summer of 2017. And then there was a coaching change at Cincinnati. And when that happens, usually the assistant coaches are shining up their resumes at that point. And then I was reunited with Dan Simons down here at IMG Academy. So that's the long and short of it. I probably lost you somewhere in between there, but that's a little bit of my story in a nutshell.
No, I think that's fantastic, Cook, because you just described a lot of people listening right now are going like, wow, this guy's done a lot of things and his career could have gone this way, could have gone that way. The path that we eventually follow, I think, is more interesting than where you end up, right? Just getting from point A to point B in the journey, that's life. Is that every day of grinding, finding out more about yourself and about your experience, and you're raising your kids, and what was a priority one day is no longer a priority.
John, you're so right. And I look back at my life now, and who I married is someone that is very similar in passions and very sports minded. And, I married her because we were both, our sisters randomly met, but we were both recovering from an ACL surgery. She was at University of Maryland playing soccer. I was in the White Sox organization. So you just look back on life, John, like you said, and you got to grind. You got to follow your passion. And typically God is going to put you in a position where you're going to be happy. But there's a lot of distractions, these days, especially for the kids out there. It's really tough because, society and people are pulling them in all sorts of directions. And I think it's very difficult these days.
Yeah, well, definitely. We can't wait to talk to you more and more about that because you're seeing that at IMG.
Yeah.
Like most coaches say are dealing with that too. Those that coached maybe 10 years ago don't want to coach anymore because it's such a struggle. But I know that Zach, And Ty, I have some follow-up questions to your story. I do want to ask one before they ask their questions. This whole thing with basketball and baseball, I mean, there weren't a lot of two-sport athletes there aren't a lot in the history of sports, right? You had Michael Jordan who dove into baseball, right? After his basketball career. So did that play a role into you? Like, well, Michael Jordan is Michael Jordan. I love baseball. I mean, did you have an equal passion for both sports?
I really did, John. I really did. And I remember vividly going out in my backyard and or in the hoop in the front yard and practicing, moves that I saw Jordan did on TV. And then even throwing the football to myself. Like I just, I knew sports were important to my parents, especially my dad. And then there was just so much excitement, especially from the basketball side growing up. And I was very fortunate to go see Michael Jordan play. And I just loved watching, the Bulls during those years and all the excitement. And, fortunately I was a pretty good ball player too. But then you saw at the professional level, these guys, and even like Deion Sanders, the one day where he, I think, ran back a touchdown, a punt return or something, and then dressed for, I think it was the Braves, I think that night. It was more of, I don't want to say norm, but it's like, if they can do it, why can't I? And I was very fortunate to get to do that at least my freshman year because I wasn't ready to give it up, John. I wasn't ready to, I still had those dreams. And unfortunately these days, I think it's very tough on kids. I think it's very competitive. Kids are exposed to more high level sports at a younger age. And so they're being tugged to specialize a little bit. And then at IMG, like I have some really transparent conversations with families, and in some ways turn them away from IMG because there's not too many multi-sport kids here. It's very specialized, and we go all year with our training.
I definitely want to ask about what the minor leagues were like at the time that you were playing, especially because when I think of, those late 90s, early 2000s, like that's prime steroid era. Like what was that like being in a clubhouse every day at the professional level? Did you see some crazy stuff or like, well, I mean, it's so different now, but what was it like back then?
Well, I mean, it's still very competitive. Everyone was fighting, for their lives. In terms of the steroid era, like I wasn't, really visibly, didn't visibly experience anyone getting shot up in the butt, in the bath, anything like that. I really didn't. But again, the same pressure existed then like it does now. And, like even Andro was big, so that was kind of like a side, performance enhancing drug, too, where, you just did what you could to survive. And so, not that I took steroids or anything like that, but the competition was crazy though. And it is wild hearing now, like with the minor leagues and them fighting for, housing and better pay, because like back then, like, I mean, they could have paid us peanuts. I mean, it was our love and our dream. And I remember, in Bristol, Tennessee and in the Appy League, and I think I had 5 or 6 roommates in a 1-bedroom like basement of a home, and that's just what you did, and we didn't complain about it, and we either walked to the ballpark or hitched a ride with a guy who had a car, but it was very competitive. It was what we loved and did. But in terms of like the steroid era, I know it was during that time, but I wasn't. Yeah, I didn't. I didn't see a ton of that, which I guess.
Yeah, it's totally different today. And like the players are getting fed full meals like after the games and all this stuff. Dad, I remember one time Jim Jarecki, he's the GM for the West Michigan Whitecaps, John. I was working for him one summer and he told me, he was like, when did we start feeding the players all this stuff? He was like, I've been doing this for this long. It's 2012 now. When did all this happen? We didn't have used to do all this with the clubby and the menu and all this. No, single A.
Single A is single A, And it's funny, Zach, because some of that I think is good, and we struggle a little bit at IMG. And I know we're going to talk about IMG, but like our facilities are big league. You go to our weight room and it's better than, most SEC weight rooms. And so we struggle with that with guys sometimes, especially even the weather. A lot of the college opportunities are going to be up in the Northeast and in cold weather. And so, so even though we mimic a lot of like a college and pro environment with the competitive nature, they might be going to a school after IMG that's going to have, facilities that aren't even close to ours. So, going back to the minor leagues, part of that is good. If you don't want peanut butter and jelly, get promoted to AA, and if you don't want hot dogs and hamburgers, get promoted to the big leagues, So some of that is kind of just part of the story that I can appreciate.
Let's dive into IMG a little bit. Maybe for all the people listening at home that might not know what IMG is, you want to just kind of give us a little background about IMG?
Yeah, absolutely, Ty. So IMG Academy started, as a tennis academy. Nick Bollettieri, famous tennis coach. Andre Agassi was his famous, student years ago. He bought a little plot of land, quarter of a mile from where I'm sitting right now, still on campus, but, had big dreams of just developing these young kids to pro stars. And in that sport, it was a number one tennis player. And then it evolved in these other sports academies. So David Ledbetter started a golf academy, IMG Academy Baseball. You had all these different academies that were very sports based. Okay. And then they would go to school. We started a private school called the Pendleton School, which is really interesting. A lot of people don't know that. So the kids would go to the Pendleton School, okay, and their jerseys actually said the Pendleton School, but then they trained at these sports academies on campus. For the last 10, 15 years or so, now we are all inclusive with IMG Academy being the academic development, the sport development, and then the personal development. So there's a lot of mental development, we have mental coaches, we have nutrition coaches, we have leadership coaches, we have character coaches, like character development coaches. And it's grown now. We have about 1,500 kids from all over the world. And in baseball just alone, we have about 240 kids, ranging from sixth grade all the way through a post-grad year. And that post-grad year is also considered like a gap year. It's a one-year program in between high school and college.
So out of those players that go into that post-grad year, are those typically guys that are going to get drafted or just aren't sure of going with the scholarship or not?
Yeah, not so much guys that are hoping to get drafted. We have had a couple of those guys in the past, okay, even before I got here. But it's mostly, Ty, for kids who maybe are very young for their grade, and this is kind of a way to reclass, okay? You guys could understand that. Maybe it's a kid who has some lower level D3 options and wants to get up to D2 or D1. Maybe it's a kid who just hasn't had a lot of exposure and they just need to be in a program where they're going to develop and then benefit from our network to get a chance to play baseball after.
Coach, having done some work in school systems and having coached many years myself, I would imagine you have some numbers to support the success of the academy. So in the baseball program, are you looking for success rates for draftees or is it mainly driven to college? Getting these kids out of college. Where are we going?
Well, this past year, we were heavy on the D1 commitments, okay? Now, you guys and I know that D1 commitments could range from a fall roster spot to, a full so some of those kids have to make a decision where, hey, do I take this roster spot? And it could be a spring roster spot at Xavier University, or do I go to this D2 school and be on a 60%, scholarship, and then there's a plan. So, we were heavy. The majority of our kids were D1 commits this past year, but there were also a lot of D2, D3 commitments, junior college, and then potentially NAIA. And traditionally, about 90% of our kids, John, have an opportunity to play baseball after their senior year. That's a very, very high percentage when you look at, matriculation rates at other schools. Maybe there's 2, 3, 4 kids that go on from a high school team, not 90%. So those are really tough conversations with kids. And then on the front end, John, when someone gives us a call and has interest, we've got to be very transparent that there's no magic pill at IMG. We don't have any fairy dust or anything. The secret sauce is really finding the right fit for this type of environment. And then it could be a very good Division III program. It could be a draft. There's a wide range of commitments after that.
I do philosophy there, and Zach and Ty, you probably know this firsthand because you lived it, is that I started, John, I don't know if you know this story, but I started a travel baseball club back here in Grand Rapids in 2001 called the Grand Rapids Flames. In 2001, as you recall, especially in the northern states, in Michigan, we were more focused on the upper levels, high school freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors. So there was plenty of opportunity for them, for these players that had aspirations of playing collegiately, to play on travel baseball clubs. But the youth part of it, 8 years old to 12-year-olds to 13 or 14-year-olds, that, especially here on the west side of the state of Michigan, there were very few teams, let alone a club. So we started this. My whole philosophy of starting the club was that if you have a 10, 11, 12-year-old that says, hey, I love this game, and I want to be around other players that love this game. I want to be in a team, because I always felt that if you're around this talent, it'll make you better, right? You're going to want to practice harder. You're going to want to not let down your team. You're going to want to work. You're going to develop skills quicker than if you were, and nothing against rec ball or something like that, but you don't know the level of coach you're going to get. You don't know the level of commitment. You don't know the competition you're playing. And that's not to say that a player can't come from that environment. I just felt like you had a better chance. And I would imagine IMG is kind of like the same philosophy, right?
It really is. And we're very fortunate, John. The floor of the program has rose in my 7 years. I'm kind of on my 8th cycle in terms of recruiting for the program. I work with one other gentleman named Kit Carlson, and Kit's been here, years after me. But it's been very fulfilling to see our program grow. And when I first came in here, we didn't even have a middle school team. We had a freshman team. That was our youngest team. And if you had a 7th or 8th grader, he would have to play on that freshman team. Now we have 2 middle school teams. We have close to 30 middle schoolers in baseball alone. We have a freshman team. We have a JV team. And then we even have a junior national team for those very talented younger kids in our program. So the ideal age, John, is, hey, if they're ready at 6th grade, let's get them here. Now, for some of those 6th graders, they got to play on the big field. So as you guys know, 12U baseball, that's going to be composed of a lot of 6th graders. They're still playing on the Little League field, okay? But, man, if we can get them in our developmental system at 6th grade and they're playing with the middle school group and learning the fundamentals of playing on the big field, man, think about how much that's going to benefit them 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And so, again, we've been very fortunate. A lot of the kids that are calling in now, even a lot of kids out of camp, because we recruit out a lot of camp, are the middle school aged kids. And again, development reigns here. That's what it's all about.
Now, can you imagine that? You're in 6th grade and you say to me, Dad, I want to do it. I want to be Mike Piazza. And I was like, you know what? We're sending you to Florida. You're going to IMG.
I can't even imagine how that is, being that age, just fully committed. That's really cool that there is something like that out there. I honestly didn't even know that there was something like IMG out there. So that is really cool that there's something available for kids that are ready to take that next step.
The success rate is just unreal for IMG. Well, I mean, use that term loosely, right? Because, even if he doesn't go play college baseball, he can still be a success story. But Coach John, I know you've seen multiple IMG guys come through and sign a professional contract. The MLB draft rankings just came out not too long ago. Your boy Noah Franco outfielder, left-handed pitcher, ranks number 23 on the draft list for 2024. How excited are you for Noah, his family, potential first-round pick? Like, what's his life going to be like over the next few months?
It'd be crazy. And again, we started the show talking about, how tough it is for these kids. Even though Noah has developed into a top prospect, I mean, he's going to have a lot of decisions to make, coming in, I guess, July now. I think the draft now is in July, around the All-Star game. Noah's a great story. Noah and Dean Moss. Dean Moss is a junior in our program, but they jumped on board as 8th graders, a few years back, and they knew each other out in California, and they said, hey, let's go ahead and do this, and kind of like we're talking about this younger group that's coming in. They kind of started. They were some of these younger kids that started coming, very talented kids that wanted more, and they played in our junior national team, and then Noah actually reclassed up. So he's a very young 24 grad. And so from a draft perspective, obviously that's going to be more attractive for them. The crazy thing, Zach, is with Noah is he's committed to TCU, but, and I don't know the details or anything. It's none of my business, but like the NIL stuff now, because we just had a kid, Cam Johnson, last year that, everyone's like, he's going in the first round, like he's gone, like he, wants to get paid and move on with his life. Well, Cam Johnson now ends up at LSU, and I don't know any of the details there, but, some of these high power college programs and now with NIL can really offer these guys a nice alternative. Whereas in the past, Zach, you and I know, they're gone.
Yes, 100%. Vandy, Coach Corbin, they're gone, man.
That's it. So Noah, yeah, it's going to be very exciting to watch Noah. And, the other exciting thing, and I don't mean to ramble, but last year our team was 25-0, our top team. And Max Preps named us national champions, a huge feather in the cap for the entire program, the entire staff. But a lot of those kids are coming back, so very fulfilling when you see kids like Noah Franco, who has a chance to go in the first round. Well, Noah Franco has been here, since 8th grade, so as opposed to maybe a kid who just comes for a year, this kid is IMG and IMG is him. So it's very fulfilling, and we're very proud of him.
That's really cool to be able to watch these kids develop and see them reach their next potential. But since you've got some experience, Zach and Ty, and they played their major college baseball in the 2000s or 2010s, I would say, right, Ty, right?
Yeah,
2010s.
Yeah,
2010s. Same with Zach and same with Zane, who's not on today's podcast. But now we're talking, it's 2024. They're like, they're old now.
Let's say that. Be careful there, John.
But my question is you've seen it there at IMG. The game has changed. It has changed tremendously. Even you look at what's happening in Major League Baseball right now. The rules have changed over the last couple of years. You mentioned NIL. That's new. I mean, the game keeps evolving. I think what I taught back in 2001 when I was a youth coach, those things are old now. Some of the techniques have changed. Training has changed. We're more aware now of our bodies and how and then now lately the mental side of the game. All these things are keep evolving, and if you don't evolve, I go to some of these games and watch coaches do the same thing they did 10 years ago, right? And you're like, the game has changed, and if you're not changing, you're not getting better.
Yeah, it's such a great point, John, and I think the crazy thing about IMG is when I came from Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's now in the Big 12, but we were in the American, we were still a top-ranked conference. This was in some ways like, I don't want to say upgrade, but like these kids now have more resources that compare to like a professional organization. And when I talk about like the mental coaches, like that was a huge hole in my game, and then I got to a certain level that I had trouble competing. And so I think that's one thing we try to do at IMG is even if we if a kid doesn't make a certain team, like a national team, like even if he struggles at IMG, we celebrate those moments because now it's an opportunity to take advantage of some adversity in high school or even in middle school, as opposed to their first or second year in college, where at that point it can be detrimental. And now with the transfer portal, it's crazy. So John, you come in and we have a lot of expectations for you. You don't perform your freshman year. It's not even your freshman year. It's your freshman fall. I'm looking to replace you. And even though that was my kind of mindset as a recruiting coordinator in college back in, 16 and 17, I didn't have the transfer portal, so I had to look at a 17 or 18-year-old high school kid. Okay, I'm going to give you, John, an extra year or two to develop. Now those guys don't have to. They can grab a kid that they might have recruited who's at Kentucky, who's maybe, not getting as many at-bats. I can bring him in and just let you go. And John, even if you're on scholarship, okay, if you're not playing baseball, you're gone. That's your life. So it's crazy. And I think I really enjoy being at IMG and helping kids through this a little bit where, they think it's do or die. They think it's, a life and death thing if they don't make a top national team and this and that. All it is an opportunity to pick themselves up. All it is an opportunity to get better and to deal with adversity. And so when they leave here, we just hope that they've gone through some of these tough times, but then they picked up some tools and skills to deal with them, at the college or pro level.
Typically, you see those players, those people that are positive, that can be forward thinking. They perform better in those high pressure situations. I mean, that's why you'll see coaches that in high school that are just like screaming at kids, putting their kids on edge. It's hard for them to perform. If you see coaches, I mean, in the big leagues, those managers are just sitting watching the game. They're not yelling at their guys, even in the minor leagues too. It's totally different mindset, and that's very important. It's very important what you're thinking, what you're literally thinking about pitch to pitch. I heard a speech on Andy McKay, who's a professional development guy in the major leagues, and he was talking about breaking down the seconds between the pitches. What you think about during these 2 seconds, and then these 2 seconds, and then these 2 seconds to lead up into you taking your breath to take the pitch. The game is just so mental, and that's why it's the greatest sport there is, right?
No, you're right. You're right. And there's challenges around every corner, and it's very humbling. My former boss, Ty Neal, always said that the game was made to break you. It was made to break you down. And, if you view it that way, you're going to be miserable and you're going to get broken down. But if you embrace it and, understand that failure is just part of it and just learn from it and get better. And that's an advantage. Like it's great in gymnastics. You screw up like that much, now you're done. I mean, you might be in last place, and to the naked eye, it might look like a perfect performance. In baseball, like, as we know, guys, like, you go for 4, but hit the ball hard twice or get a couple walks and make a play. Like, that's not a bad game, so you kind of got to roll with it.
I just wanted to remind folks that you are listening to Big League Dreaming, the podcast, a show about fulfilling your dreams and taking it to the next level. It's a podcast featuring a dad, that's me, and his 3 sons talking about the game they love so much. Right now we're talking to John, I'm going to mess this up, Lackaff.
That's it.
All right. Currently at IMG Baseball Academy, or IMG Academy, and the baseball coach and student advisor there. Zach was able to find him and bring him on the show. Appreciate that. Folks, if you have not listened to our podcast and you want to check out some older episodes, please do that. We're available right now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, you can find Big League Dreaming. And the reason I'm mentioning kind of resetting things and mentioning this is because, Ty, on the last podcast, you brought along one of your former players in baseball. You played at Kalamazoo Valley Community College in Kalamazoo. that was a great interview because you got to hear a coach that you played with coaching high school baseball right now, who was so positive, and he was like, that podcast really impressed me because here is a young kid. How old is he? How old is David?
My age, like 30, 31.
Yeah, 30, 31, and has a great baseball mind. We asked him on the podcast, like, what do you aspire? What do you want to do, right? Where are you going with all this stuff? I mean, you're 30, you're 31 years old. I mean, you obviously know what you're talking about. You're a motivator. You know kids. You can evaluate talent. He's like, I just want to be the high school baseball coach in my hometown. I mean, how is that, right? How does that happen?
I mean, he's just one of those guys. He's a hometown guy. He loves his home where he came from. He just is a guy that gives back. You know what I mean? Like, he just loves giving back.
And I think the reason I was thinking about that is because during that podcast, and go back and listen to it, folks, it really is inspirational to hear his story. But when we're talking about the mental side of baseball, there are some times when you as a player, and Ty, we talked about your success story when you had your first season where you didn't play, maybe got 3 at-bats the whole year, and then you turn around your second season and you're the team's MVP, which is inspirational right there. The mental side of the game, and if you don't have any support, I mean, it takes someone with a lot of fortitude and perseverance to like say, you know what, I'm going to do this myself, right? And that's part of the mental side of the game as well. And I mean, you know what you're talking about when it comes to like, hey, you know what, no one's going to do this but me. I've got to go out there and make my opportunity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What I want to ask you, Coach John, like we're talking about the mental side of the game right now. What are some of those conversations with some of those players that might not be as strong mentally? Like, how do you keep them? How do you get them to like embrace the failure? Like, hey, this isn't the worst thing possible. Like, how do you keep them positive? I know it's a tough question, but
it's a tough question. But it's just what's going on with these kids. It's reality. I mean, social media is a killer. Unfortunately, it sabotages happiness. It gets these kids, thinking they're not good enough. At IMG Academy, I mean, one of the conversations I have up front is that your kid's probably not going to make the team he wants to make come January. And, I think some of them look like, what are you talking about? But it's like a big league organization here. We have our big league team, major league team, but, we have kind of a developmental, set of teams underneath that. And, all the way down to rookie ball. So, if you're an 8th grader, or a freshman, you're going to want to make junior national. You're probably not going to make that team. If you're a junior or senior, you're going to want to play in that top team. You're probably not going to, I mean, just honestly, the odds are not with you. So it's very difficult. I think, when I bring a kid into my office, we have to focus on the kid. We have to focus on the kid today compared to the kid yesterday. So forget about what team you're on, make the big time where you're at right now. And I think the kids that can focus on that and not get distracted about the national team or get focused on this kid committed to LSU, why am I not? Like the kids that can just really focus on their own development really make huge strides here, Ty. But it's a constant effort. It's developing a routine. That's really big with us and our mental coaches is what's your routine? And the kids who don't have a routine to fall back on really struggle because they get distracted. The kids that don't search out our coaches and resources struggle. Like for me, I was a mental midget. So if I was at IMG Academy, I would have gotten exposed mentally, and I would have needed to search out these mental coaches. Hey, I need a routine on deck. I need a routine to get my mind back in order after I make an error. And it's funny, Ty, because I got into the minor leagues into my 20s, and I still didn't have these tools and skills. And if I bobbled a ball, or if I made an error, if I threw one in the stands in the first inning, don't hit it to me. I'm liable to make 2 or 3 more errors. I didn't have the capacity to kind of deal with some of that failure. But I had to really grind. I had to kind of figure some things out on my own. And again, going back to the advantage of IMG is, some of these kids forget about the tuition cost. They're investing, moving away from home, the comforts of their friends back home, to really be exposed to some high-level things. But those kids that embrace that, and develop a routine and search out the resources. Now, I mean, shoot, they're picking up years of life development through the sport of baseball, which is really kind of cool because, you know, we're here today, guys, because we love baseball. Like, baseball is just such a developmental platform for life.
Sure is. Zach, do you have anything to follow up on? Because I have tons of questions, but I don't want to monopolize things.
Yeah, I know we'll be wrapping up shortly. But I do have one more question for you, Coach. I have to ask you about Ian Happ. So, when I was working in Myrtle Beach, I was lucky enough to see Ian Happ play second base just about every game for the Pelicans. Labor Torres was our shortstop. It was a pretty unreal double play that we had that summer. One question that our dad likes to ask oftentimes is, like, characteristics of players that are able to make it. Like, what are some common characteristics of guys that go on to the next level, that reach the major leagues, something that sets them apart? You were lucky enough to coach Ian at Cincinnati and have a great relationship with him. What stood out as far as Ian Happ goes compared to, like, other kids that you see?
Wow. Yeah. Ian, a tremendous kid. Went through a lot during my time at Cincinnati. You know, the first thing was Ian was recruited by a different staff. He was recruited by Brian Cleary, who was the head coach at that time. And so you guys know when a new staff comes in, it's very difficult for those kids that were recruited by the previous coach. And the transfer portal wasn't there, you know, and Ian might have been a kid that would have transferred out. You know, he was a Pittsburgh kid and had a good freshman year. And you know, he might have just transferred out at that point, where back then, I guess that was 2013, 14, somewhere in there. He was kind of stuck. And so, you know, him and our head coach would butt heads a little bit. Ian's a very stubborn, you know, has a stubborn personality and you know, very confident in his abilities. And you know, so that was the first step right there. I was very impressed with Ian, you know, how he kind of handled that. It was very difficult for him, but he a lot of perseverance there. His father got very sick and eventually passed away a few years later. That was very difficult on the entire family as well. Ian was some of the characteristics of Ian that he still has today. I think very stubborn with his plan and approach. You know, a lot of ways, he was a professional hitter, you know, back in college. Like, he worked at it. He was constantly grinding with his swing, constantly looking to improve. We had a nice facility at UC that, you know, he could spend hours there after practice or before school. You know, and he was a switch hitter, obviously. So, you know, he actually had to work, you know, twice as hard just because he hit from both sides. But very, very stubborn with this plan and approach. Very, very stubborn. So when Ian would go up to home plate, he had a plan. And he was just very, very stubborn with that. And a lot of times Ian taught me, like, there was very little that I brought to the table with Ian. You know, maybe stay positive and just keep going and things like that, more of like a mental approach. But, you know, very, very, very stubborn with the approach. And I see it with my young kiddo right now in baseball, where sometimes he doesn't have an approach at all. And he's learning that, you know, that's not going to work. And he's been a bigger, stronger kid. But if you go up there, it doesn't matter what the pitcher's doing. If you don't have a plan and an approach, you're going to really struggle. So Ian was, you know, I think that's what stood out to me. You know, his deep love and desire and passion for the game. I mean, he couldn't get enough. And I remember some recruiting trips, I'd bring Ian with some recruits of mine, and, you know, we'd be watching an exciting basketball game, and I'm going nuts, and Ian's just kind of calm. You know, he's just, you know, he was very, very calm and confident and had a presence. But probably at the basketball game, he's like, man, I wish I was hitting right. You know, like, he just, it's in his blood.
That was probably cool when he got drafted by your hometown, Chicago, you know?
Kind of. I'm a White Sox fan, though, so, you know, but yeah, it was great. It was great.
I got a fun one for you. If you could choose any player, past or present, to give a motivational speech at IMG, who would you choose?
Oh, that's a good question, Ty. I like that.
Man.
I bet they get speakers to come in all the time too.
Yeah, I had to turn them down last week because I was busy.
Probably you, Zach. No, you're talking. Is it a former player that I coached or just?
Just any player. Like it could be Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Literally anybody.
Me?
Wow. Well, I think, I'd probably get personal with IMG. I think, and specifically with our program, maybe a guy like James Wood. James Wood came in our program. Actually, no, I'll change it up. Stone Russell, because Stone Russell, he was drafted last year by Kansas City. Stone Russell had been here since like kindergarten. And that was when we had a grade school. And Stone Russell, is IMG Academy baseball. And, he kind of was in the program, played varsity baseball as a middle schooler, had been through a lot. And Stone wasn't necessarily the most elite athlete out there, but when you talk about the mental game and dealing with adversity, like the kid had been through a lot, and he was our starting shortstop on our undefeated team last year. But it'd probably be Stone going through his story. And again, we talked about Ian, his love and passion. I mean, at IMG, again, like the kids who can stay focused on their development and try to be a better version of themselves today than they were yesterday. Stone's a living example that like you can really do what you want. And even though Stone wasn't a first round draft pick, even though he might not be a Hall of Famer one day, like I really do believe this kid's going to make it to the big leagues and have a career because he has an innate ability to just kind of focus on the present and then just continue to grind and get a little bit better. And not worried about this kid or that kid or, this kid got drafted here or there. He couldn't be happier. I think he got drafted in like the 19th or 20th round. Like, I think they only have 20 rounds now, don't they, guys?
Yeah.
And so, like, he was gone. Like, and he was committed to, I think he was committed to Florida. But, like, if he got drafted, he got a pro opportunity, he was gone. And I don't know what he signed for or anything like that. And he's also a kid that he was on Team USA. Okay, the summer before, the fall of his senior year, and all of a sudden this guy's, working out a catcher. All of a sudden this guy is closing out games. Okay, and so a lot of kids, I think these days, they pigeonhole themselves. Hey, I'm a second baseman. That's all I do. Okay, well now again, when a coach is making out a lineup, okay, well all he does is second base. Okay, he's out. Because he's not hitting as well as this second baseman. Stone Russell, it doesn't matter. Put him in left field, put him in center, put him in third. And even though he's not an elite athlete, like he's going to figure it out. So, sorry, long answer there, but Ty, that would be the guy that I would put in front of our program to give a speech.
Love it.
Yeah. Coach, my last question is a real simple one. Zach, if you want to chime in after that, go ahead. But let's talk about parents, because all of us on the podcast today are parents, right? And we have a unique and special role in our child development. And it's fun to watch my sons who are now young parents, and they're going to be going through the same things that I went through, and they're going to be learning a lot on the job training, as so to speak, right? But what advice would you have for parents? Because you're talking to a lot of them, right? I mean, you're recruiting them to come to the school, and then you're working them through the ups and downs of any development of any young person. What advice would you have to parents that they have an athlete with some talent? Do you push too hard, not push too hard? What role do you have?
I think parents have to realize, and I'm struggling as a parent right now, I'll be honest with you. So I'm always looking for advice, guys. But I think we have a tendency to start planning out our kids' lives, and we start looking 5-10 years ahead and be like, okay, well, if we want our kid, or if we think our kid wants to get to here in 10 years, okay, this is what has to be done today. And they have to be the star player, and they have to play shortstop, and they have to make this elite team and this and that. And so I think in a lot of ways, parents, they lose track of today. And then I think a lot of times we avoid failure. You know, we really shy away from failure for our kids. We think it's going to ruin them. We think that, you know, like they're going to lose the passion for the game, that you know, if they have a bad coach, that coach is going to ruin their future. And so the biggest advice I think I have is, especially with the youth, is let them do things that they love, make them do things that they don't necessarily love, and be okay with failure. Like, let them fail. Like, the more they fail in a lot of ways is producing a more well-rounded kid, more well-rounded athlete, a kid that can deal with adversity better, a kid that can problem solve better. And I know it's tough. It's really, really tough. My oldest kid is into basketball, and he was on some subpar basketball teams, not just by convenience. It was a small club locally, and they were not very good. And he had to deal with losing at a young age. He had to deal with playing superior talent at a young age. And we knew it hurt. Like, we were upset in the stands, but it's kind of made him a little bit of a dog today in the sport, because like he had to learn at a young age that, like, I'm not going to be the best on the court. I'm not going to be the biggest. And so that would be my biggest advice. And I think going to like IMG, you got to be okay with your kid struggling. And I think that's the best development. The best advice I have for parents is be okay with it, and then just be there to pick them up. Like, you know, give you another quick example with my oldest son with basketball. Guys, they were losing by 40 or 50 points every time. Like, it was, when we played those elite teams, it was out of hand. So what we try to do with our kid is focus on the battles within. Like, hey, did you stop your guy from scoring? Hey, you got a deflection on that one pass. That was a great win. You got a rebound, okay, over a bigger defender. That's a big win. So we try to break it down now. So even though we lost by 40 points, the big scoreboard, what about the little scoreboard? You know, what was your record with, you know, how many wins did you get on the little scoreboard? And I think with baseball, the same thing, okay? And it might be on a team where the kid's fighting to get playing time, but then he comes into the game late and he draws a walk. And what a great at bat for a kid who sat on the bench the whole game and then comes in a tough situation, gets a walk or makes hard contact. So I think allowing your kid to fail, and then, you know, embracing the small scoreboard, you know, I think that is I think my best advice, and that's a long-winded answer, but these failures are really big at a young age, because when they get to an older age, if they can't deal with it, now the consequences are detrimental.
I love that advice. That's very, very good advice. So thank you for that, Coach. And thank you for hopping on with us. You were more than generous with your time today, so we appreciate you joining us.
Really enjoyed it, guys. Holy cow. I don't get asked to do things like this much. So it made me feel really important today. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Thank you so much. There are tons of things I still want to talk about, but we do want to respect your time. Ty, where can people, we should ask, actually, Coach, if you want to get a hold of you, find out more about IMG Academy, where can they go?
Yeah, I mean, my email address, very simple. It's john.lackaff, Lackaff as in Frank, at imgacademy.com. So john.lackaff at imgacademy.com. If anyone has any questions about recruiting or the academy, anything at all, please shoot me an email.
Awesome. Thank you. And Ty, if people want to get more information about our baseball podcast, Big League Dreaming, where can they go?
Yeah, you can follow us on Twitter at BLDpod. That's at BLDPOD. We're also on TikTok at Big League Dreaming. And of course, wherever you listen to your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and here on YouTube, Big League Dreaming, the podcast. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. We'll see you on the next one.